Have you ever seen a golden child's life crumble in seconds? When my father saw me freezing in the rain outside our locked gates, he didn't look for keys. He floored the gas and plowed his SUV straight through my mother's prize-winning roses. He kicked the front door off its hinges, snatched my sister's iPad, and projected her disgusting group chats onto the giant living room screen. That night, the masks came off forever. The rain wasn't just falling, it was a horizontal assault. In the foothills of Colorado, they call these mountain storms the cleaners, but that night, it felt like an ocean trying to swallow me whole. I stood outside the massive wrought iron gates of our estate, shivering in a thin cotton hoodie that had long since given up. Through the golden glow of the living room window, I could see them. My mother, Margaret, was pouring tea for my sister, Brooke. They looked perfectly, agonizingly warm. Margaret had disabled the electronic gate, trapping me on the gravel shoulder of the public road. My phone was vibrating with a final 12% battery warning. I didn't cry, and I didn't beg. I simply dialed my father. The cold wasn't just on my skin, it had settled into my marrow. My jaw was trembling so violently that my teeth rattled like dice in a cup. I tried to pull my hands into my sleeves, but the fabric was a heavy, sodden weight, useless against the biting wind whipping off the peaks. My fingers felt like leaden weights, numb and unresponsive, as I gripped my phone like a lifeline. 20 minutes. That was the distance between a quiet family dinner and a hypothermic nightmare. I closed my eyes, and the ghost of the house's warmth hit me harder than the sleet. Not long ago, the kitchen had been filled with the scent of roasted chicken and rosemary. I had been setting the table, smoothing the linen. Then the screaming started. Brooke had come flying down the grand staircase, her face a masterpiece of practiced devastation. She was sobbing, thrusting her phone forward as if it were a weapon. She claimed $12,000 had been drained from her savings, money our grandmother had left her specifically for a summer program in London. She pointed a trembling, polished nail at me, claiming I'd used her biometric login while she was napping. I didn't get a word in. No defense, no request for a paper trail. My mother didn't even glance at the screen. She didn't need evidence, she only needed a target. The look she gave me was one of instant, sharpened loathing, a look that felt painfully familiar. She crossed the foyer in 3 sharp strides. The slap that followed was louder than the thunder rolling over the peaks. It wasn't a reprimand, it was an expulsion. She seized my arm, her grip bruising the skin, and marched me to the entrance. She cast me out as if I were a piece of broken furniture she was tired of looking at. Standing there in the shadows, watching the rain dance in the glow of the security lights, I realized why I wasn't pounding on the bars. Any other teenager would be hysterical. She'd be screaming into the intercom, pleading for a shred of mercy, confessing to sins she hadn't committed just to feel the heater again. But I remained a statue. In that freezing dark, I recognized the architecture of her cruelty. My mother wasn't trying to teach me a lesson. She wasn't acting out of a sense of misguided justice. She was savoring the moment. I could feel her watching me from behind the heavy velvet curtains, waiting for the break. She wanted me to crawl, to shatter, so she could play the role of the benevolent queen when she finally decided to let the stray back inside. For 15 years, she had carefully constructed this reality, casting me as the shadow so Brooke could be the light. If I begged, I was playing into her script. If I screamed, I was giving her the fuel she lived on. That realization turned my fear into something cold, hard, and jagged. I wasn't her child. I was a prop in her private theater. And I was done with the performance. I wiped the stinging water from my eyes and turned my back on the house. I watched the road, looking for the first sign of high beams. I wasn't waiting for a parent to save me. I was waiting for a witness. Then they appeared. Two piercing white lights sliced through the downpour. My father's heavy-duty truck didn't slow as it rounded the bend toward the gates. He knew the code. He had the remote on his visor. But he didn't touch either. He saw his daughter shivering in a storm that could kill, and he saw the iron fence standing between him and his blood. He made a choice that defined the rest of our lives. He swerved hard to the right. The engine let out a guttural roar, a mechanical snarl that drowned out the thunder. He didn't hesitate. The heavy truck jumped the curb, its massive tires shredding the immaculate turf Margaret had spent a fortune to maintain. There was a sickening, beautiful crunch as the brush guard plowed through her prize-winning rose bushes, flattening the landscaping and bypassing the locked iron gates entirely. He didn't stop until the bumper was inches from the porch steps. He was out of the cab before the engine had even fully shuddered to a halt. He didn't run. He stalked. In one fluid motion, he stripped off his heavy coat and wrapped it around my shoulders. The sudden warmth was a shock to my system, but the look in his eyes was more lethal than the ice storm. He didn't ask what had happened. He didn't need my side of the story. He looked at the locked front door, then back at me, his gaze darkening into something predatory. "Stay behind me," he said. His voice was low, terrifyingly steady. He walked up the stone steps and didn't bother reaching for his keys. He drove his boot into the center of the heavy oak door, right beneath the deadbolt. It was a solid door, reinforced and designed to keep the world out, but it wasn't built to withstand a father who had just seen his child treated like a stray. The wood splintered with a crack like a rifle shot, and the door swung inward, slamming against the interior wall. The transition was jarring. 1 second, I was lost in a mountain gale. The next, I was standing in a silent, golden foyer that smelled of lavender and expensive wood. The sudden stillness made my head swim. Margaret was standing in the center of the living room, her porcelain cup suspended in midair. She didn't look horrified that her husband had just driven across the lawn and breached the house. She looked inconvenienced. She looked like a hostess whose curated evening had been interrupted by a boorish guest. "Have you completely lost your mind, Julian?" She snapped, setting the tea down with a sharp click. "You've ruined the garden. I told you I was handling her. She needs to understand that her actions have consequences." My father didn't even acknowledge her. He didn't validate her with an argument. He didn't scream about the cold or the cruelty or the risk of hypothermia. He walked past her, his heavy, mud-caked boots leaving dark gashes across the cream-colored rug. He marched straight toward the sofa where Brooke was huddled under a cashmere throw, her eyes wide, clutching her tablet to her chest like a shield. "Julian, do not ignore me," Margaret shrieked, her voice rising an octave. "Your daughter is a thief. She stole $15,000. My father stopped in front of Brooke. He loomed over her, water dripping from his hair onto the expensive upholstery. Brooke tried to shrink into the cushions, attempting to summon the watery, pathetic gaze that had worked for 17 years. She opened her mouth to start the performance, but my father held out his hand. "Give it to me," he commanded. "It's private," Brooke whimpered, looking toward Margaret for support. I said, "Give it to me." He didn't wait. He reached down and wrenched the tablet from her grip. "That's mine," Brooke screamed. It wasn't the sound of a victim anymore. It was the shrill, entitled cry of a girl who had never known the word no. She lunged for the device, her nails raking across my father's arm, but he held it high above his head, out of her reach as if he were keeping a dangerous toy away from a toddler. Give it back to her, Julian. Margaret shouted, stepping between them. You are violating her privacy. You have no right to treat her like a criminal in her own home. I pay the bill, he said, his voice cutting through her noise like a blade. I own the account. I have every right. He didn't waste time with passcodes or ethics. He walked to the massive screen mounted above the hearth and tapped a single icon on the tablet. The screen flickered. The digital painting of a mountain meadow vanished, replaced by Brooke's home screen, magnified to a staggering size. Stop this at once, Margaret yelled, trying to block the display. Move, he said. He didn't raise his voice, but the sheer weight of his authority forced her aside. He opened the payment history. There was no need for technical wizardry. It was right there at the top of the transaction history. Sent to a high-end designer boutique. $15,000. The memo read, investment piece. The silence that followed was suffocating. Margaret stared at the numbers on the wall, her mouth working wordlessly. Margaret blinked, her mouth opening and closing like a fish on dry land. That proves nothing, she stammered, desperate to keep her worldview from collapsing. Avery could have done that. She could have stolen the tablet while Brooke was sleeping and made the transfer herself. Is that right? My father asked. He swiped up and opened the mail app. The latest email was time-stamped 3 hours ago. Subject: Your order has shipped. It was from a luxury boutique. The tracking number was live. The delivery address wasn't my room, and it wasn't a secure locker. It was addressed to Brooke, care of her best friend's house 2 streets over. Did Avery order a $5,000 handbag to your friend's house, Brooke? He asked, turning to look at her. Did she forge the confirmation email, too? Brooke was shaking her head, tears streaming down her face. But they weren't the cute, sympathetic tears she used on Margaret. These were the ugly, splotchy tears of a cornered animal. I needed it. She sobbed. Everyone has one. You don't understand the pressure. But that's not the worst part, my father said. He wasn't done. He swiped again and opened her messages. He didn't have to scroll far. The group chat pinned at the top was active. The last message had been sent 5 minutes ago. Right while I was freezing at the gate, right while Margaret was pouring tea. On the screen in high definition, everyone read Brooke's words. Oh my God, you guys, it actually worked. The loser is literally freezing outside the gate right now. Mom is totally buying it. She's pouring me tea. I'm a genius. Bye-bye, Avery. Attached to the message was a photo. A blurry, zoomed-in picture taken from the living room window. A picture of me standing in the rain, shaking. The Golden Child narrative didn't just crack, it shattered into a million irreparable pieces. My father stared at the message, reading it once, twice, 3 times. Then he slowly turned to look at Margaret. You said you were protecting the family, he whispered. Look at that screen, Margaret. Look at what you were protecting. She's 16, Julian. Margaret's voice was shrill, desperate. She stepped in front of the TV, trying to block the damning image of the group chat with her own body. It's just a mistake. She was acting out. Girls her age do stupid things when they feel threatened. We can return the bag. We can get the money back. It's just money. Just money, my father repeated. His voice wasn't loud. It was dead. He didn't look at her. He didn't look at Brooke, who was now sobbing into her hands, making sounds that might have been apologies if anyone was listening. He looked at the tablet in his hand. He wasn't finished. He had seen something else in the mail app, something that had caught his eye before he switched to the messages. "Move, Margaret," he said. "No, you've made your point. You've humiliated her enough." He didn't argue. He just stepped around her, tapped the screen, and the display shifted again. He wasn't looking at the inbox anymore. He had opened the trash folder. "What are you doing?" Margaret demanded, grabbing at his arm. "Stop digging. You're just trying to find reasons to hate her." "I'm trying to find the truth," he said. He opened a deleted email on the large screen so no one could miss it. It was an acceptance letter sent yesterday for a full scholarship to a prestigious summer research initiative. I had waited weeks for it, convinced I hadn't been chosen. "She got in yesterday," my father whispered, stunned. Then we saw the reply, sent 20 minutes later from my account while I was at practice. It declined the offer and was immediately deleted. The silence in the room shifted. This wasn't just theft. It was sabotage. My father turned to Brooke, his voice breaking. "You didn't just steal from her. You found her acceptance, declined it, and erased it so she'd never know." Brooke froze. Margaret had no defense this time. I stepped forward, no longer feeling the cold. "You didn't want the money," I said. "You wanted to destroy my way out because you're afraid I might actually be better than you." For the first time, Margaret didn't jump to protect her. Then her expression hardened into a mask of pure entitlement. She stood up, smiled thinly, and ordered us out of her house. My father didn't waste his breath. He called the sheriff. When the deputy arrived, my father handed him a legal document. The house was held in a specific trust for me. My mother's right to reside there was contingent on keeping me safe. By locking me out in a life-threatening storm, she had violated the terms of the trust and effectively evicted herself. The ruling was immediate. 10 minutes to gather their essentials. I watched from the porch as they were escorted into the storm, no longer powerful, no longer protected. When the door finally closed, the house felt quiet and safe for the first time in my life. Later, my dad made hot cocoa, just like he used to when I was small. The scholarship was reinstated the following morning. They thought ownership meant control, but real ownership is about accountability. And now, finally, this life belongs to me.